interactions between students, teachers, and pedagogical content takes place within a school's physical infrastructure. Ensuring adequate and sufficiently equipped infrastructure is key for teaching to take place in acceptable conditions and for learning to flourish. A warm welcome to today's edition of Hude. I am Blessing again.
And I am Jennifer again to thank you for joining.
Well, today on Hude, we'll delve into stories about the impact of school infrastructure on education, including World Bank says a huge learning crisis going on in Latin America due to poor school infrastructure. Ghana's alarming school dropout rates linked to education crisis caused by inadequate infrastructure. And finally, UNICEF collaborates with the World Bank to revamp Nigeria's education system through school infrastructure makeover. Details in a moment. A school's infrastructure, including buildings, playgrounds, amenities, libraries, and laboratories, greatly impacts student enrollment, attendance, completion, and academic success. According to a recent report by the World Bank, education infrastructure has been identified as a crucial element in learning environment in schools and universities. UNESCO says an adequate school infrastructure should include classrooms that are safe, accessible, and equipped with basic amenities such as electricity, water, and sanitation facilities. The infrastructure should also include libraries, laboratories, and other facilities that support quality education.
Additionally, the infrastructure should be designed to be inclusive and cater to the needs of all students, including those with disabilities. A recent report by the World Bank highlights that high-quality infrastructure facilitates better instruction, improves students' outcomes, and reduces dropout rates, among other benefits. Many countries, however, use a fragmented or piecemeal approach to investing in their education infrastructure.
Target 4A of the SDGs specifically states the importance of building and upgrading education facilities. But how many countries are keeping up with these demands? Well, we'll go through these and many more after the short break. Thank you for staying tuned. And now we'll begin our stories with a recent report by the World Bank emphasizing the need for better school infrastructure in Latin America and the Caribbean. The report highlights the lack of basic reading skills in a majority of students despite attending school. The report suggests that inadequate infrastructure has been a significant contributor to the learning crisis in the region, with many school facilities lacking necessities such as proper ventilation, lighting, and hygiene. These infrastructural defects, the report says, makes it difficult for students to learn. Aggravating the situation are natural disasters such as floods and earthquakes. These could be vulnerable too, posing risk to the safety of students and teachers. The report recommends authorities focus on inclusivity, adequacy, and effectiveness to improve education outcomes for all students. Schools should be designed to ensure access to vulnerable students, meet basic safety requirements, and facilitate effective pedagogical practices, such as collaboration and teamwork. The report also suggests 3 strategies to make progress in these areas: creating policies that position infrastructure as an educational resource, gathering data to identify areas of risk, and collaborating with all key stakeholders to ensure school buildings are aligned with pedagogy in design, construction, and maintenance. To conclude the report, The World Bank expresses the need to adopt these recommendations for countries to turn school infrastructure into a powerful tool for improving student outcomes and ensuring that all students have access to quality education. School infrastructure over the years has been a major issue. We've talked about the effects infrastructures has on learning outcomes, on students, and on education generally. And this is a testament that we need to ensure that every school is doing the best it can to give its students the best they deserve. Now, we're talking of Latin America and the Caribbean. And well, for them, they have certain issues that affect them. Their learning crisis of recent has been due to the fact that they do not have conducive environment. Latin America comprises of different countries all put together, and one of the basic things I must highlight as their problem is the fact that they suffer from natural disasters that affect their school infrastructures. But then, before that, do they have adequate infrastructure in place?
Okay. So I saw a story about a little girl who is about 10 years old.
Yeah.
And it's not like she's not going to school. She actually has access to school, but she can't read. And they say that it's because they don't have ventilation in their classroom. They don't have electricity, so they have to lock their windows to protect them from the any natural disaster that can happen to them. And also, I also saw that they could not even move their chairs to be able to collaborate with other of their classmates. So automatically, the pedagogy of the whole activity is already ruined. It shows that infrastructure, in as much as yes, access to education is very important, but infrastructure too is a need and should not be something that is just at the scale of it. We've seen a lot of classroom, a lot of schools where they say government approved, but you look at the state of the infrastructure in this school, and I'm wondering how did this school even pass through the test of it?
Honestly,
Because now that they've mentioned that, UNICEF mentioned that we need three things to highlight how important infrastructure is. We're looking at inclusivity, we're looking at adequacy and effectiveness. It shows that the school needs to provide infrastructure for people based on, not just based on like you're rich, you're poor. They should have access to it because they need education.
well, basically now on the screen just before now was the unique guidelines for adequate school infrastructure. You see sanitation facilities, hygiene facilities, safe water, electricity, secure physical environment, and garbage disposal. But then, just from the story you gave, ventilation is key.
Yes.
Imagine a girl, and I think this story was particular about the Dominican Republic, the girl. Yeah. So it's part of Latin America. So, it's important to ensure that children are put in a safe condition to learn. Because unlike adults, even adults complain, not talk of children that, are limited with their senses, with their mental dexterity and all of that. So it is important that if a school infrastructure should be put up, it should have sanitation facilities, hygiene facilities, and all of these guidelines that have been listed at. However, due to the particular problems Latin America faces, they have been recommended like three basic things they should do. I think we should have that on the screen so we could take a look at it. Three basic things for LAC to look into to ensure that their infrastructure is put in place. Now, the very first one is to gather data to identify areas of risk. They are prone to natural disasters, so it is important when they are building schools, they check the area, they check things basically to ensure that this place is safe. Next, we have create policies that position infrastructure as an educational resource. It is important. Place it as priority. Put policies that protect the buildings, that protect the areas, the environment, ensure there is cross ventilation, ensure that there is electricity, and come on, provide chairs, provide things that will make it easy for children to learn, for adults to learn, and all of that. And finally, for Latin America and the Caribbean, you have collaborate with key stakeholders to ensure school buildings are aligned with pedagogy in design, construction, and maintenance. I think I touched on that. So they need to do this, particularly because of the kind of problems they have there. I'm just hoping that other regions will have targeted interventions as well to ensure that their school infrastructure is up to date and up to standard for students.
Absolutely. Infrastructure is really, really important in making a child want to go to school. A lot of them are interested in school, but due to the state of, the way their school looks, the way they don't have access to the proper ways of learning, no team collaboration, the windows are not open, a lot of things. Like you mentioned, their senses are already like they're not comfortable. As adults, we are not comfortable. How about children who
Yeah.
are but they are, speaking of other region, we have in Ghana a recent report by the Africa Education Watch, a civil society group focused on education, has identified poor infrastructure in basic schools as a major driver of school dropouts. According to the report, more than 5,000 basic schools in the country are being operated under trees, while about 4,200 schools lack junior high school infrastructure. These schools are mostly situated in the northern, Volta, and Ashanti regions, with a few in the greater Accra region. Africa Education Watch says between 20 and 25% of student dropouts in Ghana are due to the lack of school infrastructure in the communities. Furthermore, the World Bank, UNESCO, and other international organizations have also highlighted the need for more investment in basic education infrastructure to improve access and quality of education in Ghana. However, despite the creation of the Ghana Education Trust Fund, GET Fund, to address such challenges, the 1.4 billion Ghana cedis generated in 2021 for infrastructural works in schools saw 60% being used to pay debts. Now, looking at the state of educational infrastructure in Ghana,
Imagine.
they actually brought out money for this, but it was used to pay debt. It shows that they did not consider it a priority. Now, I was looking at 5,000 students, they go to school under trees. How about what happens when there's rain, when there's excess sun? We're looking at the way things are in Nigeria with the amount of heat. Imagine people having to school under trees and seeing that the money that they're actually making plans, the World Bank has made plans to get these children into better infrastructure,
Yeah.
but the government just doesn't see it feasible that they should put all the money into the infrastructure. Shows the lack of priority and the lack of accountability in the government too.
You know exactly what I keep saying. Well, this is Ghana, it's in Africa. And I don't know why when we come to Africa, most of our problems, are centered on the fact that we do not place priority for important things. Look at Ghana. You received 1.4 billion Ghana cedis to invest in your educational infrastructure. But then you decided to use 60, more than half of the money to pay debt. Come on. Like, come
Is education
on.
that unimportant to you?
It is really important that we put things that are supposed to be important as important. Because tell me, in Ghana, it is said that about, as of 2023, it is said that 5,000 children school under trees. Your children are schooling under trees. They do not have roofs to cover them when they are trying to learn. When they are, let's put every other thing aside. They went to school. They are trying to learn. Okay, and then they are seated under a tree, scorching sun all on them, rain, just like you mentioned. What are our priorities?
Yeah.
What exactly is, your priority as a country? Because I think I was going through the Ghana education Ministry of Education website, and I saw someone complaining and talking about the fact that they allocate very little, to their education. We're not even talking about, say, teachers or other things, but for school infrastructure, you need to ensure that everything is on point. There is a need to do better for Ghana.
It is important to know that the infrastructure of a school determines how much a person will want to be in school. Now, knowing that there's actually been ways to influence, to make people actually go to school, they are trying to generate funds to make sure that the infrastructure are being put at a very high level. But then the government doesn't just deem it fit to put the education in the right, put the money in the right place, using 60% to pay debt. So what happens? Like the debt, that means the debts were not even fully paid for. 60% were just given to it.
Do you know that it simply means they have issues as a country? No problem. Almost every country in Africa has issues, if around the world. Let me not sideline into Africa. But then you got money, you got funds for intervention for your school infrastructure, but you decided you'd rather pay debts. Were they about to close down your country? Tell me, were they about to shut down your country because you didn't pay the debts? Because look at, for example, children under trees in Ghana, and this is one of the major concern of schools in Ghana, the fact that the children school under trees. So they need to do something about it.
I read about a system that the World Bank used for a particular country, Romania, a result-based approach. I think they should implement it in Ghana. When they give you money, you should actually show how it's being done before the other money.
Accountability. We always talk about it. Each time we come on this show, we're always hammering the fact that African countries need to learn accountability. It's too much to say you have different people, intervening, trying to give funds, but then there's no accountability. Where did the money go? Okay, Ghana used 60% of 1.4 billion Ghana cedis
to pay
debt. Instead of investing in their school infrastructure, I think we should just do better. Well, now we'll go on a very short break. When we come back, the stories continues. Please stay with us. You're still watching Hude right here on the Hude Network, and now we round up our stories with news from home, where the state of school infrastructure in Nigeria has been a major concern for many years, with many schools lacking basic facilities such as classrooms, toilets, and clean water. These poor conditions have contributed to low enrollment rates, low attendance, and low completion rates in Nigeria. UNESCO states that of the millions of children out of school in Nigeria, many cite the poor state of school infrastructure as a major reason for being out of school. In response, the Nigerian government has launched several initiatives to improve school infrastructure across the country. One such initiative is the National School Feeding Program, which aims to provide free meals to over 9 million children in public primary schools across Nigeria. The government has also launched the Better Education Service Delivery for All, that is BESDA program, which aims to increase access to quality education for out-of-school children and improve the quality of basic education in Nigeria. In 2018, the World Bank approved a $611 million loan to support the Universal Basic Education, that is UBE program, and improve the quality of basic education in Nigeria. The loan is being used to construct and renovate classrooms, provide furniture and equipment, and improve water and sanitation facilities in schools across the country. In addition to these initiatives, the United Nations Children's Fund, UNICEF, in 2020 provided funding for the construction of 1,700 classrooms and the rehabilitation of 1,400 others in the states of Adamawa, Borno, and Yobe, which have been affected by conflict. We're back home.
Nigeria.
We're back to talking about Nigeria. Well, I'm particularly happy that this story was saved for the last, because we need to talk about the state of school infrastructure in our country. Now, most of the pictures we see scrolling, on the screen of very deplorable conditions are taken from our beloved motherland.
Yeah.
Look at a school infrastructure. How do you expect a child to sit in this classroom?
The state of the classroom.
Just take a look. And then, Jennifer, to make it worse, the intervention that was provided, this thing I'm about to say does not mean that one was not important. The intervention that was provided is school feeding.
I was about to say that. Like, what's the relevance of school feeding to the infrastructure?
Well, being hungry and being filled.
And then going to school and you can't even learn properly.
Well, come on, look at these pictures. They are quite alarming. Look at, this is supposed to be like a toilet or a sewage system. What if a child comes there and he falls into this place? I mean, I saw even worse pictures of, a teacher in the class with students, and then the roof was like, it was about to come down on them. Look at it. If rain comes, all of them will escape,
Can't even talk about the animals that are probably prowling around.
They will just run around looking for safety. How do you expect that children would really learn? And we complain that children are 10 years, they can't read. And then, one very funny part of this story. This is basically with public schools. If you go to private schools in Nigeria, you'd see that some of them are doing well, top tier infrastructure.
Because they're privately funded.
Exactly. So I guess we should, maybe privatize, some of these public schools. Yeah. Because, okay, cool. The government decides to do something, and then they renovate. This thing happens. I don't know if it's for 4 years. Sometimes when you go to school, you see it's renovated, painted white and green. That is
Yeah.
our color, of course, and then the year will be written there. But after that, what next?
You know, privatizing these schools, it just takes the job off the government's hand. It is the right of every citizen to education.
I
And then
understand.
telling the government that, okay, you can't do the job, let's give it to private
No,
individuals.
look at it. I feel that if they privatize it, they give it to the private sector to handle. They are going to provide the funds. However, when it comes to the maintenance, a
It will
private individual will be able to, constantly. But a government official, how do they even go there? Do they even know the state of the schools? We need to talk about these things because a change needs to happen. If Nigeria has the highest number of children out of school, yeah, we argue it to say, oh yeah, Nigeria has a large population. But then, because we have a large population, should that mean that we should have the highest? We need to do something about these issues.
Linking like the problems that affect Nigeria out of school education system, we see that infrastructure is one of them.
Yes.
And it's not like what we are seeing on social media or what we're seeing on the TV and it's like, okay, it's not happening. Look around you. A lot of schools, especially government schools, have the funny thing is you see government approved on them. And I'm like, when, like maybe the school was good before and we just did not know. But the maintenance.
That is what I'm saying. It is important because they build it. Oh yeah, new school in a rural area. Yeah, you can now go to school. Go there 5 years later. Because these schools are not even properly built. They don't use top, materials to build them. So every little thing, every little scratch, it goes crumbling. Rain will come, different seasons, winds will come, and they will affect different
No
things. So
windows, nothing.
when you build schools, maintenance has to be the highest of it. Not even just schools. Don't you maintain your house?
Of course. And now I'm not even saying that, okay, the initiatives that were done are not needed or anything. But we're talking about infrastructure. We're talking about the poor state of the toilets. We're talking about the poor state of the classes. And you're bringing school feeding program. Yes, the children need to eat, but where would they sit down and eat? Is it in the class that they don't even know if the roof fall on them the next day?
No. At least I guess when they, bring the school feeding program, parents will be able to send their children to school. Just go to school to eat.
Actually,
go to school to eat
because it's not even like the government. Government schools, most of them are actually free.
Yeah,
most of them are free.
Be free.
So it's not like you're saying you're trying to lure the parents into sending their children to school so that you can use the school fees money. All of them still boils down to the government to do their job. And yeah, privatizing most of this institution will be very, very helpful to the education system. But the government, it is their duty, their obligation to the citizens to provide a proper school environment for these children to learn. Not only increasing access, but making sure that wherever they are going to learn is actually very conducive for them to actually learn.
It is very important. And then look, another basic issue in Nigeria has to do with conflict. A lot of conflict here and there, and then you go to school. I don't know, I didn't want to make reference to this, but I have to make reference to it. You go to school, you take the students, and then the place becomes dreaded, it becomes scattered, all because they are trying to recover the students, exchange of, gunshots here and there, damage is done to the infrastructure. How do we get them back to shape? I need this, on screen showing the number of schools in the northeast that got the intervention. But then these schools in these areas were really, really bad. 496 classrooms destroyed, 1,392 classrooms damaged. So if we are talking about education, we need to take note of all of these things. Conflict affects everything. Natural disasters, oh thank God we do not have so much of it down here, but then it affects
we have our fair share of the problem in terms of insecurity.
We need to do better because we cannot overemphasize the effect of school infrastructure when it comes to learning outcomes. Let's talk of the effect it even has on teachers themselves. So it is important we do a lot more. But then we're so glad we'll not be talking about this alone, because we'll go on a very short break now, and when we come back, we'll be joined by Jennifer Kizito. She'll be joining us, have this conversation, and I hope we get a solution through it. Please stay with us.
The first season of Timeline is on. The journey so far has been amazing and impactful. The world needs change agents. The world needs me, you, and all of us. Join me on Timeline as we continue to share important information and discuss social issues that would help someone out there. Let's continue to advocate for critical changes on issues affecting our world today, and together, amplify messages that provide answers to burning questions. Our journey continues as we create awareness and promote shifts in health matters and other social issues that will alleviate personal and communal struggles, guided by international laws and best practices. Join me on Timeline exactly 7 p.m. every Friday on Hude Network's YouTube channel. Subscribe, like, and turn on the notification button. You can become an agent of positive change by dropping your comments in any of our episodes as a contributor or as a professional. Join the conversation respectfully.
You're still watching Hude Hour right here on the Hude Network. And now we're being joined by Jennifer Kizito. She'll be here with us to discuss the issue of school infrastructure and how it affects students and education generally. It's a pleasure to have you join us, Jennifer.
Always a pleasure to have you, Jennifer.
It's a pleasure to be a blessing and Jennifer.
I like how you smile there. All right, so the last time you were here, we talked about out of school children and also girl child education, and we hammered on the fact that school infrastructure is one of the basic reasons why there are a lot of children out of school and why there are a lot of girls out of school. So now today, let's talk on this issue. It is a big deal in most parts of the world. You talk of Africa majorly, you talk of Asia, you talk of America, a lot of places. Why has it not come to, the consciousness of people that school infrastructure should be one of the basic things when we talk of education? What do you think so?
I think personally that one of the issues would be parity and understanding of the importance of education for our kids or upcoming adults would help foster development, provision for these infrastructures. But it's obvious that our priorities are wrong or wrongly placed. And it's also obvious that we are not aware of the consequences of this, or we don't actually take note of them, or we notice them, but we just decide to turn a blind eye to it. So this is one of the major reasons why we are at this point right now.
I think it's practically true priorities, because look at the stories we read earlier on of Ghana
using 60% pay debt
of 1.4 billion Ghana cedis. They were giving money to invest in school infrastructure, and then they ended up using it to pay debt. So I think the fact that you highlighted priority as a major reason is a very big one. Jennifer.
Okay, so now that we've spoken about how they don't pay attention to the infrastructure of education in Nigeria, in Africa, in other continents. Now looking at the children that are in this school, having to face the problems that they face due to lack of ventilation, electricity, and all of that. What are some of the potential consequences of them staying in such environment?
Well, I'm just thinking about where to start, because school is one of the places where you hone the next generation.
Yes.
But when the adequate infrastructures are not put in place, there are all sorts of consequences, from the fact that, okay, I can remember watching a documentary of this country, Sierra Leone. There was a girl, she was crying out that the structure for hygiene, that's the toilets and the rest of them, are not put in place. And she also mentioned that the water supply is not there. So they have to travel from the school during break sessions to a stream that's not too far from school, and they go there to drink water because there's no water available in the school environment. And one of the things she pointed out in the documentary was that when they drink that water, most times they go home sick and they're not able to come back to school for days. So we see that one of the consequences of lack of infrastructure is that these kids get sick. Their healths are at risk here. So when a parent notices that one of the reasons why my child falls sick constantly is because of the going to school, and then the environment is not conducive, then I'll have to withdraw my child from school. And this is just one of the many consequences. When we talk about the psychological consequences, most of them lack motivation to come to school. One of the things about learning is that you need to stimulate the mind with things that are very, very attractive. But most of the school, they don't have the right equipment. You can be telling a child that there are different colors, and you're telling them red, blue, but they don't even know what you're talking about. Exactly. So there are no instrument or tools to like stimulate the mind. So they lack motivation. What is red? They don't know what it is. Or maybe you're telling them about the nine planets, but there is no picture, no evidence. You're not telling them about anything. You're not showing them anything per se. So the lack of motivation is what we're talking about. Then we talk about low self-esteem. Um, One of the things you'll notice with the lack of infrastructure with education is that these people can't stand on par with some certain people. These countries that lack education infrastructure, and the rest of them, they can't stand facing some countries that have developed to an extent. And even your mates in your community, maybe let's say let me cite Nigeria for an instance. There are kids that stay in the rural environment, but they can't stand with the kids in the urban environment in terms of talking experiences. So because of it, they develop a sense of low self-esteem. The competitiveness is not there. They can't just match up to the changing times, the changing seasons. Technology is changing every day, but some of them don't even know what a computer looks like, but they are taught computer and all those things. So lack of infrastructure bring about all these many consequences. I can go on listing all sorts of things that could come out of this.
I totally agree with you, especially when it comes to, the ability to want to compete with others, or the esteem and all of that. Because if you see truly a child or a student or a pupil who attends, private school, let me use that as an example, in Nigeria, and that child that attends, a public school, you can just see the difference, except for those who, are being pushed on at home afterwards from their parents and all of that. You can just see that these people are not confident, because they're learning in, environments that are not even, suitable and all of that. So that's really a big thing we need to consider. However, now let's talk about how some countries got to this point. Because look at it, there are other parts of the world where infrastructure is top notch. I mean, there's already a guideline. UNESCO has given a guideline that if you must construct a school infrastructure, you must have these things in place. Some of the major things are water, electricity, physically safe environment, sanitation, and all of that, among others. Why is it that when you come down to some countries, you find it that these countries are, it's not even way below, like they can't stand at par? You mentioned earlier that lack of priority, but should we say it's just that they lack priority, or is funding playing one part in it? Because look at developed countries. Majorly, if you go, you see that it's those developed countries, that have good infrastructure. Check the UK, the US, standard, and then if you come down to our country, or you go to Latin America, you go to India, you go down to those places, you see utterly different. Do you think it is just that they lack priority, they are not putting the priority on school infrastructure, or there could be something else?
Priority is one of the many reasons, like we mentioned earlier, but you also mentioned something, funding. Now, every year, there is a large amount of money allotted to education, allotted to school development and the rest of them, but we don't see these funds playing a part actually, which means there is a problem somewhere. Because Nigeria, for example, we know that all the sectors in Nigeria, a large amount of money is being given to them, allocated every year. And the same with all those countries. But it's obvious that they have not seen the reason that this money should actually be put into that place. Because sometimes it can be that they are just putting numbers per se. It can also mean that the money is being provided, given to the right educational bodies, but they are not actually using it. Maybe someone is siphoning it or something like that. So these are all things that we have to look at. Meanwhile, there are actually other nations that do not actually fund education. So they maybe their allotment to education is more lower. Meanwhile, in our own part of the country, we see that it's huge, but we don't see the impact. So when we look at all those countries where they don't even value education, we see that they don't even invest in it. So we expect the outcomes. But the problem is the places, countries that we see these funds, we hear 600 million, we hear 700 million allotted to just education every year. We should see a change in billions, or like you rightly mentioned, Ghana and the rest of them, in billions. So we should see a change over time. We should get to a point where we don't need UNESCO to fund countries. We should get to a point where we don't need UNICEF to come in to fund education. We should see come to a point where our nations are taking it as a priority. That as a nation, this is what we are looking at. We are trying to raise, these are the future of tomorrow. These are young ones. They will be the ones to be leading tomorrow. They're the ones that will be changing the society. So we should invest in them, in their growth and development. But if we can't just keep relying, I think that's actually one of the problems, because we keep relying on UNICEF and UNESCO, and it looks like they are forcing us to actually fund education. So, but when we come to that realization that education is very important, these fundings, we will do it wholeheartedly, and then we will put it in. We'll not just collect the money and then claim that it's part of the budget for the year. We will see the effect in most of these rural communities. These are the places where people actually, they are very, very, very they love school. They want to go to school because maybe they see a lot of people that are doing well. So they are very, very eager for it. But when they now get to the environment, they just can't stay there.
Hmm. You know, you mentioned one very important thing I was going to raise eventually in this conversation while you were addressing this particular question. The issue of siphoning funds and corruption. Corruption, I think, is one of the basic reasons why in this part of the world, because you mentioned, and we've been talking about it, UNICEF, UNESCO, WHO, World Bank, not WHO, World Bank, doing a lot, funding countries year in, year out, in billions, in millions, yet there's no difference. The leaders of the countries or the people who receive the money, do you think there is some foul play that could really, really be? Well, I think so personally, but we can't ride on my own opinion.
And you can ride on mine too. But it's obvious that something is actually going on somewhere, because we're not seeing the effects of what we claim. We are claiming every year that we're investing in education, and we are dishing out millions of naira, billions into education, and then we see something is happening somewhere. Somebody is doing something somewhere, and this is not just hearsay; it's a fact. Because I don't know how else to explain the fact that every year in, year out, we keep saying we allot 700 billion to education, and we're not talking about, and we are saying that if we are saying that we are allotting these funds to the urban areas, maybe we might not really notice the changes per se, because they're already almost there. But if you're telling me you're allotting 700 million naira to the rural areas, then we should see a change. There should be something significant happening there. But it's obvious that nothing is happening. So we allot the money, the funds to the states, and then it just hangs there. it's not
Just
coming down.
grows wings.
It flies away.
Snakes swallow money, different places, you know.
That and everything.
So
It's a
it's
big deal.
obvious that something is actually somebody's playing somewhere.
Somebody's playing
playing
somewhere.
So how then do we send a message to the government? Because it's obvious now from what we mentioned, funding, priority. They know that it is important, but they just don't think it's something they want to put their money in. Look at Ghana sharing half of the money, even more than half, to settle their debts, and then leaving out education, which was the sole purpose of the funding. How then can we send a message to the government, to people involved, that education is very important, as well as infrastructure being very, very important?
Yes.
Well, Blessing and Jennifer, this is the first step actually. What we are doing right now. This is a very big step for us to do. Like, it takes a lot of guts to do what we are doing right now. So this is one of the ways to alert the government. But as much as we are alerting the government has to come to a place where they have accountability. What are you doing? Who is in charge of what somebody is doing? Or are the people who are in charge of watching what is happening also part of those playing the game? So this is where the problem is. So the issue is that we allot funds to states, countries, and the rest of them. Nobody is watching what is actually happening. Are we seeing it? I think this is where UNICEF and UNESCO also have to look into some certain things. So I'm giving out money for education every year. There should be a body that goes around the country finding out if this thing is actually going on as they say.
You know, I sorry to interrupt you, but if it's as regards that, I think sometimes they send people, you send your reports, how you use the money step by step and all of that. But it's still not solving.
So it could actually be that they will do it, send a report, but
But
they will
it's
use very
false
super materials, or
information.
even just so that they can put a front that yes, we fixed this school, we've done this.
also be one of the things. Supposedly they might take pictures from the urban areas.
And true.
Yeah, or maybe just like she mentioned, you use inferior materials that in a year or two, you come back there and you see everywhere destroyed.
So I think another thing that the government has to look into is, just like you mentioned, materials they use in building. If my plan is long term, then I should think long term. What are the materials I'm using to build? Most of those countries where they have natural disasters and the rest of them, I should have buildings that are disaster proof.
Yeah.
So this, as I'm planning, I should think long term. At least schools that would last at least 10 years. So there is a way you sit down to plan. Also, that's when you're looking at that kind of structure, there is a way you sit down to plan. And then okay, there are disasters that will happen in this environment. So this is what we're looking at. In our side where the disasters are not very prone, but we are looking at infrastructures lasting. The reason the infrastructures don't last in our own side of the continent, it's because we don't use proper materials for building. So we are done building, it looks beautiful, but then give it 2 years or
Doesn't
3
even look beautiful.
Actually.
The architectural design.
for those that look beautiful actually. So we build, and then in just 2 or 3 years, everything is gone with the wind. You see cracks everywhere. Meanwhile, there are some structures, like I've seen most places where they're building with zincs and open windows and the rest of them. That's not long term, actually, it's not.
Yeah.
Because when the rain and the sun comes, it's going to show that you didn't plan anything. It's going to show that you didn't plan anything. And my heart goes out for these kids that stay in these rural communities. Imagine learning in such kind of environment. And this leads to most of them misbehaving. You can't be in an environment that does not encourage growth, development, and human beings naturally they rebel. So you see kids forming cults and the rest of them. It's just because the environment is not good. It's their own way of sending their own message. So these are the things we should look at actually.
Yeah.
I totally agree with you because look at children forming gangs, jumping fences for schools that have fences. So we really need to do something about the situation. However, before we, call it a day in this conversation, there was something I was chatting about with Jennifer earlier on the program. talking about the fact that I feel privatization could help. But then I just want to get your 2 cents on that. Do you think if government, because most of these issues we have are with government schools, I'm not saying the private schools are totally good infrastructure wise, but then mostly it's with the public, schools and all of that. Do you think that if we get to a point where, public education is being given to the private sector, it will help in any of these issues?
I think that's a very huge step, and it will do us good actually in terms of in the educational sector. Because one of the problems with public schools is that they answer to nobody.
Yes.
There's nobody that is really taking notes. Governments, they're up there. So nobody is really, you're not accountable to anybody. So you can just act any way you want. They give you funds, you put them in your pocket. So, but when we're talking about privatization, someone is being, if something is going on, there is somebody we are pointing at. This is the owner of this place, and people love their reputation and their prestige. And that's one of the reasons why it looks like private schools are actually doing well to an extent, because I want to keep my image, my reputation, and all that. So because of that, I want my school to be at standard. You see, most private schools renovate their schools once in a while, change maybe teachers and the rest of them. So and that's the to show that they are actually looking at development and extent now. So what these public schools, you can see a teacher that is as old as that's been in school for years.
Go into the quality of teachers right now, because
so
it's a big deal.
It's obvious that nothing is actually changing per se. Everybody behaves the way they want.
Just while we were talking, something dropped in my head. Yeah, I feel like privatization could help, but then I just thought of the cost implication. Will it mean more money, and then the poor masses will not be able to go to school? It just dropped in my head.
That's where the government comes in. If we are talking privatization of the education sector or of the schools, then government should come to a point where they subsidize these school fees for people.
I mean, if they come in, then there will be no privatization.
No, maybe they will fund the private sectors.
Scholarship for those that can't actually afford it.
A government that doesn't want to hold themselves accountable will willingly give out scholarships.
Okay, or how about we say they give these monies to a private sector? The money they always allocate, give it to the private sector. This is supposed to cater for the school fee. This is supposed to cater for the feeding. This is supposed to cater for the infrastructure. Maybe that could work.
And there will be someone that we are pointing out if something is not going wrong.
Yes.
If something is going wrong, we say this. Something is not going wrong, we like that guy. So others will take note of what's going on, and they want to change, they want to grow, they want to develop better. So privatization is actually very nice, and is a very, even though it has its own disadvantages, but I believe that it will be one of the steps we can take to actually curb all these issues we have with education in most countries.
All right, Jennifer.
Nah, I'm okay.
All right, so thank you so much for joining us. We've had a very insightful conversation. Actually, we've been able to establish the fact that yes, school infrastructure is a key player when it comes to education and the outcomes of education. We hope to see you another time, Jennifer.
I'll see you again.
All right, thank you so much. And now we go on a very short break. When we come back, we'll talk about what key players in the humanitarian and development space have to say about school infrastructures and how it affects education. Please stay with us. Thank you for staying tuned to Hude. We just had a very insightful conversation with Jennifer Kizito on the impact of school infrastructure on education. Well, now we'll take a look at what key players in the humanitarian and development space have to say about school infrastructure and how it impacts on education. Let's take a look at it. All right, we have here the UNICEF saying intense hostilities in Sudan have taken a devastating toll on children. UNICEF urgently calls on all parties to protect children and to refrain from attacking the infrastructure on which they depend: hospitals, schools, and water systems. This is it.
Yeah.
School infrastructure is very important. Else, why would the UNICEF be talking about it?
Yeah.
You know, it is very important we know that crisis, conflict, all of these things will impact on the infrastructure of a school. So this is a call on everyone to protect the schools and ensure the infrastructures are safe.
It is very clear that most of these issues, war, insecurity, natural disasters, they all just have one end point: destruction of infrastructure, loss of lives.
Yeah.
So there's nothing good that ever comes out of all of this.
At all.
And that's why, like I said, the UNICEF is actually putting in a hand, because at the end of the day, these children don't get to experience the joy of going to school, the joy of actually having a future because of something that was caused by things beyond their control.
Things beyond their control. That's the exact word. Even the way the school looks is beyond their control. So, you know, it is on us. It is, I mean, take a look at this. This is supposed to be where children go to school. Like, this is supposed to be maybe their restroom or something, but look at what it looks like.
Their classrooms.
Look at the classrooms. Well, this one is not impacted by conflict, but then it is obvious that more needs to be done to protect school infrastructure. Well, now let's move ahead.
The earthquakes in Syria and Turkey have destroyed homes, schools, water systems, and other critical infrastructure. UNICEF is setting up temporary learning spaces in Syria so children can continue their education in safe environments. This is really, really commendable.
It is.
Because, you know, when we're talking about Latin America, we spoke about how they are more susceptible to natural disasters. And we see here now that Syria, there's not, like, infrastructure is really important. Some of them get destroyed due to, you know, reasons like this. Why some are because of they don't pay attention to them. So it's really, like, important that we actually, when building infrastructures, we look at the environment that, you know, that are surrounded by them. You know, the UNICEF mentioned gathering and identifying areas of risk. So it is important that, you know, they place attention on places that can be really, you know, susceptible to these issues and build infrastructure that can stand the test of time.
Yeah, just like you're saying, and just like what our guest earlier said, it is important that when you're building a school or you're putting up a school infrastructure, because it also involves, you know, water, sanitation, and all of that. You look at the place. Look at the things that are tough to access in that place. Look at the demographics, look at the, you know, environment, and try your best to build in response to that.
Exactly.
So it is important that a check is made. It is important that you consider the environment and all that is necessary to make that space conducive for children. It is impressive, UNICEF, you know, setting up temporary structures and all of that. Yeah. But then that alone is going to disrupt learning.
Yeah.
The fact that they have to, you know, go to temporary shelters for them to take learning. Some may decide not to go. What if that place is now very far from where some children, you know, stay? Yeah. So it is very important we consider from the onset in order for us not to face such issues. Let's move ahead. All right, here the United Nations saying many schools around the world lack the basic essentials for effective learning: electricity, drinking water, sanitation facilities. Transforming education requires a significant investment in school infrastructure and services. You know, this is exactly what we're trying to say here today on this episode. It is important that school infrastructures are being paid close attention to.
Yeah.
Because, you know, in a very long time, we've not been able to place our hands on the fact that school infrastructure is quite important. So the United Nations rather is saying it is a significant investment. We need significant investment. Electricity, drinking water, sanitation facilities, we need to have them for learning to take place effectively.
There was something I saw about, you know, the Ghana system of education. They said, although enrollment rates have increased, the quality still remains deplorable. So education, yes, we're talking about sending children back to school, but for us to do that, there are a lot of things that really need to be checked to make sure that these children actually go back to school and have a better time in school.
Yeah.
You cannot tell me that, okay, we're doing feeding programs, we're doing a lot to send children back to school. Yes, they are enrolling in school, but how is the state of education there? How is the quality of their classrooms, their boards? Most of them can't have collaborative sessions because their tables are rooted to the floor.
Yeah, their chairs and
So
all of that.
you look at the problem. Transforming education requires a significant investment. You must invest in the quality of your education before you can actually tell me that education is moving forward. You cannot say that I am trying to, provide a better education. I'm trying to feed them when they can't even sit down properly in class. Their number of seats are not enough for them in school.
And then water. Imagine, pupils or students being in class and then they don't have access to water.
Yeah.
They don't have access to, electricity. Everywhere is stuffy. Everywhere is just, choked. They can't survive it. They literally cannot survive such situations. So it's important. Every school, every country should ensure they implement these guidelines given by UNESCO to ensure that school infrastructures are top-notch, because that is the only way we can have effective learning and good education. Now, let's take a look at one more before we call it quits today.
Children wash their hands in a secondary school located just 10 kilometers from the contact line in Ukraine. Conflict has damaged vital water infrastructure here, resulting in regular water cuts. I think it was you or the guest that talked about people going to a stream to get clean water.
Yeah, it was our guest.
Okay, and now we're saying that they have to actually go to another school, a secondary school, to get water, which is actually good. Okay, the school has water.
Yeah, it is impressive.
But then they have to go there to get water, and it shows that why can't they have water in their own school? Why are they moving, from their school to another secondary school?
Conflict has destroyed their own school, and that's why we need to resound the fact that, and you know the worst part? It is grown adults who involve themselves in wars, in fights, and all of that. Because children are literally harmless, except those who have been recruited. And for you to be recruited into harming someone, you must have, had some level of consciousness and self-awareness. So it is adults literally inflicting pain on children.
Yeah.
It is adults doing things that endanger the lives of children. It is adults doing things that make learning processes and procedures difficult for children. We need to do better. We need to involve ourselves into, thinking that children are really the future and they deserve an opportunity to learn and thrive in a very conducive environment. I can't say this enough. If we do not invest in our educational infrastructure, Jennifer, there is no way we would expect a very good outcome.
Yeah.
There is no way, even if it was you, even if it were to be the children of those people who construct the school, will your child be able to thrive in a situation where he's so uncomfortable, sweating, no lights, they can't breathe, they're sitting on the floor? It's not conducive.
Yeah.
It's not conducive. We need to do more.
Investing in educational infrastructure is not just where we draw the line. Now, looking, like our guest rightly mentioned, the funding is there, but how best is it being managed? Because we saw now that they donated money in Ghana, but it was used to settle part of their debts. We've seen situations whereby they bring out money, they invest in this, they donate money, they donate seats and everything. But where's the result?
We're just talking of Ghana now, but it happens in so many other places. Yeah, we've been able to highlight Ghana on this edition, but it happens in different places in Africa.
Even in Nigeria.
It happens, So just like you're saying, that is not where to draw the line.
Yeah.
We need accountability. We need to hold, and I think just like our guest rightly give us the accolades, that is what we're trying to do.
Yeah.
We're trying to ensure that things are done the proper way. Please add your voices to the fact that for education to prosper, for education to thrive, there is a need. There is an urgent need for school infrastructures to be done rightly, to be rehabilitated, to be maintained, and for them to be in a way that it will be conducive for children and teachers likewise.
Absolutely, blessing, because the fact that a lot of people actually want to be in school, but the reasons why they can't be in school is because the government did not provide enough resources for them. Even some private schools too have the problem of infrastructure, but let's focus, like the public school have it worse. So it's very important that the government places very adequate attention on these schools. You give out money, you make sure that the money is being used properly, and it's not just inferior materials being used, because a lot of them can actually put up a front that yes, we've done what you asked us to do, but then did you use actual proper materials for it? Is it in 1 year time we see a lot of people roofs falling down and a lot of that? So it's very important that education is important, but factors around it, infrastructure too needs to be put adequate attention into.
Let's take a look at some of these pictures before we call it quits today. Let's look at the pictures, see the deplorable state of schools, and also remind ourselves of the UNESCO guidelines before we end today's edition. Look at this classroom. This shouldn't be it.
Just at all. Like, it's
This
so
shouldn't
sad
be
to
it.
look at.
We need better ones. We need better ones, especially the one that really touches my heart is, that of the restroom, the toilets, and all of that. How do you expect these children to survive? What if someone falls into this
What if
pit?
there are snakes there?
It is very dangerous. It is very dangerous. We need to do more. But then let me just remind you again of the guidelines UNESCO gave, for adequate school infrastructures. The fact that you need water, you need sanitation, those guidelines they gave. You need a secure physical environment. You need electricity. You need some of these basic amenities. I hope that you are reminded by this, and each time you wake up, you remember that if my child must be in school, or if you're in a place of leadership, you remember that you need this. We need this for a school to be safe and secure. All right, and this is where we have to put an end to today's edition of Hude Hour. It's been amazing having this conversation, and I've been having it with the amazing
Jennifer again, so thank you for watching.
And I am Blessing again. Ensure to join us next time on Hude Network and be a part of the conversation. Thank you.